Bismillah, alhamdulillah, salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. Covering chapter 6 now, inshaAllah ta'ala, which is titled The Qur'an, a Literary Miracle. If you recall, just as review, the chapters before, we've built upon this argument. First talking about what is the Qur'an, defining what the Qur'an is, and that it could not have been self-inspired, that it could not have come from a teacher, that it had to come from a divine source, refuting that it could have come from a source that was evil, a source that had to be pure, because the Qur'an itself is hidayah, and it's full of nur. So that's kind of where we left off last. That it has to come from a divine source. And then he says this is just talking about external factors related to pertaining to the Qur'an. And he says that there are three aspects in the actual substance that a person could dive into, or he's going to dive into. He mentioned three of them, but the main one that he dives into this book is the literary side, the literary miracle, al-i'jaz al-lughawi or al-bayani in the Qur'an al-Kareem. Okay, and if you look at chapter 6 in the first page, he begins by addressing those that harbor even the slightest bit of doubt about the Qur'an's miraculous literacy and linguistic nature. Okay, so to such a person, he asks, literally on the first page, 6 critical questions. Okay, each representing a different possible stance or doubt that would be in the heart of someone that has shak or raib. Raib is better, because the Quran uses that. It also uses shak. Does it? Yes, it does. ذَلِكَ كِتَابُ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ وَإِن كُنتُمْ فِيهِ رَيْبَ. Raib, shak, we already mentioned. Raib is when a person has doubt and also is not sure if that's the source it's coming from is one that is trustworthy. Number one, the question or a possible doubt that a person may have: does he think that he could produce it himself? Does he think that he could produce something like it? If the Quran isn't miraculous, then you should be able to produce something like it. You know, that's one doubt. Okay, the response to all, he's going to give responses to this in this chapter, inshallah. Number two, does he admit that he's not able, but he believes that others can do it? He perhaps acknowledges that, I myself do not have the ability because my Arabic is not there, but someone else might be able to succeed in doing so. That might be a second doubt. The third doubt, is he aware that no one has ever matched its style? Does he know that there is no single book out there that has ever matched the literacy of the Qur'an and its i'jaz? Number 4, does he think that this is because of human failure or due to the Qur'an's uniqueness? Okay, does he think that this is because of human inability, or is it because of the Qur'an's own style? Number 5, does he realize that the Qur'an is the one that made them fail, that Allah Azza wa Jal is the one that presented the challenge? Okay. And number 6, does he believe all of this? So he, again, step by step. Does he believe all of this, but he still doesn't understand the miraculous nature in the language of the Qur'an? Okay. So then each of these he'll give an answer to. Okay, each of these he gives an answer to in this chapter. Next, the second page, he goes into aspirations shattered when talent meets revelation. Okay, so some might doubt the i'jaz al-lughwi in the Quran because they might themselves see success in their own poetry and eloquent writing. Not for us. I'm talking about, let's say someone who's equipped enough to be able to write some poetry. I've mastered language, I can produce something like this. Okay, to such a person we respond that don't talk the game if don't talk the talk unless you can walk the walk. هذا الكلام لا ينفع. كلام بدون سلام لا ينفع. So no proven literary master ever makes this claim. You do it or you don't do it. Okay. And these are usually thoughts that occur to the inexperienced beginner. These are usually for the one who's, in over his head, as they say in English, in over his head. Why don't you, instead of being arrogant, go start studying Arabic literature in depth, study the different classical forms, the different styles, the different things, okay? Equip yourself with these tools, okay? Learn how to be able to judge what is high quality and what is low quality, because a person who studies the field of Arabic literature and studies poetry, he's able to gauge what is this high Arabic or is this this is nothing. Okay, then after you do all of that, after you become a student and study for 10, 15, 20 years, then go back to the Quran, and then you yourself will refute yourself. Your own journey will refute your earlier thoughts and doubts. Because you want to be all big, have all that talk, then show it. Okay, but the reality is, of course, you're incapable. I'm incapable. All those that try and attempt, they're all incapable. The Qur'an is untouchable. Okay, and also, mastery.
Especially if you don't know how to read and write, and then do it in 23 years, you cannot.
Oh yeah, even subhanallah, amazing, yeah. And then on top of that, mastery breeds humility. Mastery breeds humility. This is the reality. This is why the Pharaoh, the sorcerers of Pharaoh, his magicians, okay, they were the first people to believe. When Musa alayhi salam, he showed his miracle and he threw the snake. Why were they the first people? Because they know what is sihr, they know what's not sihr. What did they say? فَأُلْقِيَ السَّحَرَةُ سُجَّدًا عَلَى طُولٍ. They said, no, this is not sihr. We know sihr. We've been doing it. So this is something unlike, this is not sihr. This wasn't a trick. This wasn't human. They knew it. This was divine. So similarly, when you start to study and you understand, أنت يعني صاحب الصنعة, you know what Arabic is like, and then you read the Qur'an, على طول. فألقي السحرة سجدا. Subhanallah. Nothing can be rivaled with the divine power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's above and beyond the limits of man. And anyone who tries to bring anything forth like the Qur'an, it'll expose how limited they are. Okay? So the challenge is there. Yalla, tafaddalu, hawilu. Try your best. Try and write something. Okay? But before you write it, and before you share it, make sure you review it properly. Okay? You don't want to make a fool of yourself. You don't want to make a fool of yourself. Try it, review it, okay? Make sure it's the best you got, and then do it. Don't just give us anything. Give us the best you got, okay? Because your failure will just make you a mockery and it will just expose you more. You'll harm yourself before anyone else. Okay? And then Shaykh Daraz talks about how if you look at the long record of people that have tried, they've all failed. There's not a single person that have brought anything that even nearly resembles the Qur'an, okay? And some of those that brought it, they were very ashamed of themselves, that they quit immediately, and they folded their parchments, he says, and they broke their pens. They literally folded their parchment and they broke their pens, Others, they were cunning, so they hid their attempts, so because they knew the public would reject them, and so they would hide it so that perhaps it would come out later, okay? And a third, they would publish it, and then they would get mocked and ridiculed. So learn from, and then Shaykh Daraz goes into, he says, learn from the masters of Arabic before you embarrass yourself. Look at the example of Mutanabbi and Al-Ma'arri and the great poets of the past. Okay, all of them were literary geniuses. The geniuses of the Arabic language. Yet none of them dared to challenge the Qur'an. When you hear the poetry of Mutanabbi, oof. The poetry of Mutanabbi, it's as though he's telling you what's exactly in your heart. He has the ability to, keep his Arabic high, but at the same time, and it's so personal. He has a personal touch to it. And so none of the geniuses of the Arabic language and the masters of the Arabic language ever felt that they could challenge the Qur'an, because they knew that no matter what level they reach, the level of the Qur'an is untouchable. The i'jaz of it is something that isn't reachable. So that's the first category. There's a second category of those that are not from the Arabic geniuses, okay? And they're not from the earlier skeptics, but they are a later group that they either hide their works, as he said, or they publish them and then they get ridiculed. And then he gives the example of the Qadianis. And the Baha'i sects. They made their own religious constitutions for their followers, okay? And they claim prophethood from them. And in reality, it's nothing more than fabricated nonsense. And you really have to be an idiot to believe the Qadiani. If someone is a Qadiani, you really have to be stupid to be able to follow that creed. They'll mix some Quranic vocabulary with some slang. There's a distortion of the fundamentals of our belief. And then you have people that die in bathrooms and they claim to be prophets. He knows the story. It's very well known in Pakistan. Even if he didn't die in the bathroom, behavior and the akhlaq of the bathroom. Okay, so and in the books that they might have written, they didn't publish them. Why? Because they know the people are too smart to be this foolish. Like no matter how low and the level of education might be, and no matter how ignorance is rampant in the society, there's still that much level of critical thinking that they will be able to pinpoint right away that this is some complete nonsense. Okay, this complete nonsense. So they're still waiting. Perhaps a time will come where people will be stupid enough to believe that someone random will come now to be a prophet. And actually, you see Pakistan, India, sometimes even now, someone will claim to be a prophet and they'll just believe. يعني مجانين عجيب جدا. Or someone will claim and say, I'm Mahdi. And then they'll have a band of followers behind them. Why? Because he had a dream. MashaAllah, Martin Luther King also had a dream. Who also made Mahdi? أنا أيضا كل يوم I have dreams. أنا Mahdi كمان, MashaAllah. And then the third type, he exposes those that made... he gives example of Musaylim al-Kadhdhab. Shameless attempts. Claimed to be a prophet at the time, a contemporary of the Prophet ﷺ. And he also claimed that he received a revelation. What did he do? He took Quranic verses and then he just changed it shway. They still have some of it. If you look it up, you'll probably be able to find it. I don't have any memorized, but it's very... it's the same patterns of the Qur'an, but then he just changes words in it. So he's imitating the Quranic rhythm, but then instead of making it full of hidayah and guidance and full of nur, it's like children's children's songs. It's like just random rhyme schemes. Like he talks about khubz and kaza. He talks about like bread and like he just takes the same patterns and he just throws words in there. خلاص أنا أيضا نبي. His followers, they knew he was lying. That's why he's called Musaylim al-Kadhdhab. Okay, it lacks any form of divine wisdom. It's like I said, it's like children's distortions of poetry. Okay, and it's not a miraculous thing for you to take the style of the Quran and then completely copy it. That's not the challenge. The challenge is to take from the themes of the Quran to produce a new style, or equally of great eloquence. Okay. And then have it with the meaning and have it with the Quranic, high status in its i'jaz lughawi. Bring those two together and then bring forth. But if you're just copying verses of the Quran and then you're putting random words in there, this is not the challenge. This is not the challenge. This is why Rafi'i, a literary master, he notes, he said that Musaylama, he never aimed to actually match the Quran's beauty. He knew it was impossible. The Arab of his time, they would have immediately exposed him if he even had tried. So they knew he was kadhab, Musaylim al-Kadhdhab. Okay? They simply wanted to rather have a prophet from their tribe than from the tribe of Mudar. They wanted a tribe from Rabi'ah rather than Mudar. Okay? And so...
the other literally explain those people, were they at the time of Prophet Sallallahu Muqaffa and Mutanabbi, they came after or during the time? After.
Yeah.
And then they came after, and then they kind of
studied
the Quran, and that and they said
and they're living in that early they're living in that early environment of high Arabic eloquence, and yet despite that, all of the masters that came from the time of the Sahaba, from the time of the Prophet himself, from the time the Quran is being revealed until many generations after, until now, no one has ever matched the Quran. He just gives examples from the geniuses of the language.
They came afterward and they studied Quran, and then they commented that we will not be able to.
Well, of course, yeah. And even if they had tried, they would not bother exposing themselves, making a humiliation out of themselves. Okay, and so as I said, Musaylima al-Kadhdhab, even his followers knew he was a fraud, but they'd rather have a prophet be from amongst themselves for power, and of course out of their own tribal arrogance. Mm-hmm. So some people, they might doubt the Qur'an's miracle, not because they think that they can match it, but because they assume that someone else that's more skilled that can do it. That might be a doubt that someone might have. I might not be capable, but there might be someone else that is able to do such a thing. Remember from the 6 questions he posed in the beginning? So the answer to that, and the advice we give such a person, ask the masters of eloquence in your time. Ask the masters of Arabic in your time, and look in history Has anyone brought or produced anything equal to that of the Qur'an? If they say yes, tell them to prove it. If they say no, then this admission of theirs is the greatest proof against them. Okay? So the greatest poets, we look at their lives. None of them ever went against the Qur'an. In fact, many of the masters of the Arabic language became servants of the Book of Allah Azza wa Jal. Okay, so you just have to look at and examine history. No one ever equaled the Qur'an in its literary style. Those that tried, they gave up in shame. And so, subhanAllah.
Are there any geniuses of the Arabic language that are not Muslims, like previously or now?
Yes, but the vast majority were all servants of the Book of Allah Azza wa Jal. And those few that you could imagine weren't, I mean, I don't know, I can't think of anybody by name. But even if they were, okay, look at the example of Quraysh. At the time of the Prophet ﷺ, the most staunch disbelievers were people that recognized that this is not the words of a man. This is not the words of any human being. And yet, despite that, because of their pride, their ego, their arrogance, like the likes of Utbah and Uqbah and Walid and Abu Jahl, they knew the style. They would have fairs where they would gather together and hear the best of poetry and judge it and this, that. So sometimes Allah just puts a hijab. It's not about just knowledge. It's not just knowledge that makes a person Muslim. You could be the most simplest of people, and then have the cleanest of heart, and have the connection to Allah Azza wa Jal. So there's a level of divine tawfiq. It's not just about knowledge.
Musaylama happened after all the big people in Quraysh passed away. So if you think about it, if they were truly, if they thought that they could do it, they would have hired somebody like Musaylama.
Oh, of course.
Quran and compete with the Prophet. Right? But because they realized that they couldn't find anybody. And the best of the poets used to come to Mecca to meet everybody, because everybody goes to Mecca for their hajj to their idols.
Yeah.
So they could have paid somebody to come and do that.
Yeah. So Shaykh Drazi actually says this. He says the Quran was revealed at the golden age of Arabic. Its peak in vocabulary, its peak in rhythm, its peak in poetry, its peak in stylistic power. And the Arab, they would even have literary fairs where they would get everyone together to showcase the best of poetry, the best of eloquence. This was their form of entertainment. This was their form of expression. Okay, and so you had poets like Hassan ibn Thabit radiallahu an. You had poets, like Khansa, and they were all, just giving their best. And yet, despite that, in this type of environment, the Quran comes and they're like, man, we can't bring this. We can't bring anything. Otherwise, they would have. Because they're always, bringing poetry. If they all got together, قُلْ لَإِنِ اجْتَمَعَتِ الْإِنسُ وَالْجِنُّ عَلَىٰ أَن يَأْتُوا بِمِثْلِ الْقُرْآنِ, they're not going to bring anything like the Quran. If all of the jinn, all of the humankind were all to come together and bring anything and try to produce anything like the Quran, they will never be able to.
The whole Quran is about stories, right? It's situations and...
It's not all about stories. A part of the Quran dives into stories. They say the Quran's themes...
wisdom and in those situations, kind of, right? First of all, the declaration of Tawheed.
Yes, Aqidah, Ahkam Fiqhiyya, and Qasas Qur'ani. You can say kind of anything in the Quran usually ties into one of those three things. A story of the Quran, Aqidah, and also Ahkam Fiqhiyya. But they're all, like I said, these are just overall, but the reality is it's more complex than that. It's much more complex than that.
Sure, but people can make up stories and think about it.
Yes.
These are other two factors,
Yes.
Three categories, right? The two categories are dominant in the Quran. So it's at the moment, at the situation, something happened to Prophet, and then revelation
Subhanallah. Yeah.
All of those things are involved.
Yes. So they would never be able to produce anything like it. Again, because there's like we said, we're dealing with the substance now. You think about the historical facts of the past, and you think about the prophecies of the future. We already discussed all of that. So the Quran invites that competition. It says, try to bring something like it. The challenge is open for everyone. The challenge is open, especially for the people of that time. Produce a book like it. You can't do that? Okay, then 10 surahs like it. Okay, then one surah. You can't even do that, then anything that even resembles one surah. فَأْتُوا بِسُورَةٍ مِّن مِّثْلِهِ وَدْعُوا شُهَدَاءَكُمْ. Then what does Allah say? فَإِن لَمْ تَفْعَلُوا. وَلَن تَفْعَلُوا فَاتَّقُوا النَّارَ الَّتِي وَقُودُهَا النَّاسُ وَالْحِجَارَةُ وَأُعِدَّتْ لِلْكَافِرِينَ. This is a clear challenge that they will never be able to do it. And Allah already tells you, don't even need to try. You won't be able to do it, okay? The Qur'an here, it's taunting their pride. And yet despite that, imagine the Qur'an, Allah Azza wa Jalla is challenging the people with the biggest egos. The people with the most stubborn, and yet they're not able to respond in writing. How do they respond? They don't respond with pens, they respond with swords. They respond with violence. Because at a time when a person is completely failed and has no valid argument, the last thing that they could do is at least fight you. We see this with all of the prophetic stories. Allah Azza wa Jalla gives examples of that. So subhanAllah, the Qur'an was revealed, the challenge remained. Generations and generations passed. They speak Arabic. They still have that level of Arabic eloquence in their style and in the way they speak, and they still couldn't match it. Had they been able, if they wanted to undermine Islam, which was growing rampantly, all they had to do is produce a book like it. The challenge is still open. You have all of these universities. You have all of this AI. You have all of what we have access to now. You have access to manuscripts of old, and you have access to weather reports that you can kind of tell what the weather is tomorrow. There's so many things that we have access to now that they would not even imagine was accessible 1400 years ago. Okay, bring something like the Quran.
Yeah, still the challenge.
The challenge is there. You want
individually and collectively.
And collectively, yeah. You want to deter 3 billion Muslims away from their way. All you got to do is bring something like the Quran. Go ahead. Honestly, why don't all of these universities come together and fund a $1 trillion project? Yeah, $1 trillion is nothing. If you want to deter 2 billion people away from Islam, this is the best way. Go try it. Bring a new Quran. Bring something. They won't be able to, subhanAllah. What do they do? They lower their heads in silent defeat. Each generation admits it, and the miracle of the Quran, subhanAllah, remains. And their admission of defeat is always... It joins the historical record of all those before them that tried and failed, or that didn't try and still yet opposed Islam. Okay? Subhanallah. So someone might say, okay, that just because it hasn't been produced, I can't do it, someone else can't do it, doesn't mean it's beyond human ability. Perhaps nobody tried seriously enough. Maybe people weren't interested. Maybe they were distracted or prevented. Maybe Allah intervened them from trying. These are other doubts that the last one, that Allah intervened them, they say if it's sarfa, this is a wrong claim. This is the claim of the Mu'tazila, popularized by Nizam. Why? They say because this argument is flawed. Because a'jami. Only a person who doesn't understand the Arabic eloquence of the Quran would say such a thing. That it's not the actual Arabic itself, but it's just that Allah has prevented them from breaking something like it. Meaning it's possible, it's just Allah has prevented them.
Somebody believes that Allah is there.
Huh?
Somebody believes Allah can prevent him from something, then they believe in God.
Yeah, but this is the Mu'tazili view. Because the eloquence of the Quran is in, the i'jaz, the miraculous nature of the Quran is in the Arabic itself. Their claim is that no, it's not in the Arabic itself, it's in that Allah prevented people from bringing something like the Quran. Nobody says this except someone who is jahil bil-lugha al-arabiyya. Jahil bil-bayan, jahil bil-balagha. Someone who doesn't understand the fine points of the balagha of the Quran. And as we've mentioned all throughout our classes of tafsir, that you cannot take a single letter of the Quran and replace it or remove it, except it'll completely change the ayah. And the intended qira'at are to aid one another, and how they stack up on one another. We discuss all of that. So the argument, that there was no motivation. Perhaps it was just people are lazy, they're disinterested, or they're distracted. Can you imagine Quraysh that were the staunch opponents of the Prophet ﷺ? They had every possible reason to take up the challenge. The Qur'an is constantly taunting them and challenging them. It's mocking their pride, saying that you cannot produce anything like it. And it's struck at the heart of their identity. People that are always writing Arabic, people that are always doing poetry. It's literally refuting their religion, their beliefs, their way of life. For those people that lived by their honor, their pride, and their ego, what stronger how much more can the Qur'an provoke them or taunt them? Of course, The Quraysh, they even bribed the Prophet ﷺ to the, these are the steps that they took to take the Prophet ﷺ away from this path. They bribed him. They said, we'll give you the whole dunya. You want any of our women, just take it. They boycotted him. They exiled him. They smeared him with labels, ﷺ. They tried to imprison him. They tried to kill him. They tried to exile him. They waged war against him and the Sahaba multiple times. So you're telling me these people that are doing all of these efforts, they didn't try to at least bring something like the Qur'an? The Qur'an is keep telling them, try. And yet none of them are trying. Why? Because they know they cannot bring anything like this. Was there campaign against the Prophet ﷺ? No, it wasn't. Did they have a vengeance against him? He lived with them peacefully. They loved him. He was their nephew. He was their cousin. He was their relative. He was someone that was Sadiq al-Amin. They would trust him even before Islam. So it wasn't against Islam. It wasn't against the Prophet. It wasn't against the early Muslims like Abu Bakr and Uthman. It wasn't against them. Nor was it against even their private worship. Their threat was the public recitation of the Qur'an. And so that's why the Prophet ﷺ, when he would go and seek protection from other tribes, he said, the Quraysh have prevented me from conveying the message of my Lord. So, subhanallah. These are the people. Why didn't they try? Why didn't they bring anything like the Qur'an? Because they have the most reason to do something. Okay.
They were in the best time to, if they were ever able to do it.
Yeah.
At that time.
Mm-hmm. It would have been that time. And because they knew they couldn't match it, they went to all of the other ways to try to suppress the message of the Qur'an by any means necessary.
They still try to do that, right? Still not.
They'll never be able to. You have all the AIs in the world, you have all of the PhD Orientalists in the world, bring them together, they won't be able to. So someone might argue, again, continuing this set of questions, maybe something outside of them prevented them from trying. Okay? But if that were true, then they would have tried and failed. They would have said, why can't we do this as we usually can? But they didn't even attempt it. This is again our argument against those that say that it's the sarfa that Allah prevented them. Okay? Because they knew this is not within human reach. This is why they didn't even try. They didn't bother trying. If they thought that the Qur'an was just like their speech, they could have recycled their own old poems. They have the mu'allaqat, they have all these different, they already have a whole bank of Arabic poetry that they can pull from. They already have a whole bank of Arabic literature that they could pull from. They could have at least tried to imitate it, even once, but they all remained silent. And instead, when they heard Surah An-Najm, وَالنَّجْمِ إِذَا هَوَى وأنه هو أضحك وأبكى وأنه هو أمات وأحيا وأنه خلق الزوجين الذكر والأنثى من نطفة إذا تمنى وأن عليه النشأة الأخرى وأنه هو أغنى وأقنى وأنه هو رب الشعرى وأنه هو أهلك عادا الأولى وثمود فما أبقى وقوم نوح من قبل إنهم كانوا هم أظلم وأطغى والمؤتفكة أهوى فغشاها ما غشا فبأي آلاء ربك تتمارى هذا نذير من النذر الأولى أزفت الآزفة ليس لها من دون الله كاشفة أفمن هذا الحديث تعجبون وتضحكون ولا تبكون وأنتم سامدون فاسجدوا لله واعبدوا. Subhanallah. All of them, they prostrated. And it says that in all of the verses that were recited. They couldn't, The kuffar did this. And the least of them who had too much arrogance, he took dirt and put on his face. تخيلوا. They heard the Qur'an and they knew this could not be the speech of a human being. Subhanakallah. Sadaqallah al-Azim.
They may think it.
Subhanallah. Something so incredible, subhanallah. Subhanakallah wa bihamdik nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk.